Welcome to Deal Nation. On the show today, we're joined by Edwin Kelly, the founder of Specialized Trust Company. How are you, Edwin?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. So you and we got connected a couple of months ago through the Family Mastermind, Real Estate Mastermind group, and got to talking. And you do a lot of work with that group and with real estate investors to help them both protect and grow their money. In some ways, protect their assets as well. But I think that that's such a relevant topic for our listening audience because anybody that's an entrepreneur, you want to be safe. You want to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to tax protect yourself, to grow your wealth up to the point of course, everybody's sort of end goal, generational wealth. So having you on as a subject matter expert, I think is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So we're gonna spend plenty of time in this conversation, really getting into the mechanics of what people need to do to both kind of protect and grow their wealth. But I'd like to start with, because this is a real estate investment show. Let's start with real estate investment and kind of how curious if you were were you a real estate guy who found a love for finance? Are you a finance guy who just really got to know and love the real estate investment business? What was your track towards REI?
Yeah, so the way I kind of got into all of this was, and I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of the story. I was raised by a single mom, and she was a social worker in the state of Ohio. Didn't make a lot of money, right? And so in sixth grade, I started doing odd jobs. Now, I grew up in Ohio, and the good thing about living in Ohio is that there's all kinds of horrible weather all the time, right? So there's always leaves to rake, lawns to mow, or snow to shovel. And so, as a sixth grader, right, you could do those things and make a few bucks doing it. And so I ended up doing that, starting, working odd jobs in sixth grade, saved enough money that by the time I was in middle school, I opened up my first brokerage account, actually, made my very first investment, bought my very first stock. And the interesting thing is that was a big learning lesson for me in a couple ways. But the one thing I'll mention is that I made more money investing in that year than I did the year before working all those crap jobs. And so the big takeaway for me was the wealth and the money is made in investing. It's not in dollars for hours. Now, I didn't understand it the way we understand it now, but I kind of figured that out early on. And so I kept investing throughout high school. I went to college. I wasn't sure what to study. And so I was taking a business class, and they were talking about different aspects of business. And I remember I read this chapter titled Finance. And I read this chapter, and I'm like, this is everything I've been studying and learning about on my own. Right, because I had read books in high school and all kinds of stuff. Right? I was always going to the library getting stuff on the subject.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, actually, if you don't mind. We can jump in really quick. I mean, that's a very, very early start to gaining financial literacy. Did you have a mentor in that situation, or was it really just kind of you were chasing curiosity and self-learning?
Yeah, I think a part, it was really curiosity and self-learning. I didn't have a mentor. I always wanted one. I ended up having three throughout my career. I'll say I had three different mentors at different times throughout my career, but that wasn't until later on when I was already working. I didn't really have anybody early on. However, here's the interesting thing, and this was another perspective that I think informed this, is that I grew up in a community that is considered a wealthy community. Now, we weren't wealthy, but there was a little bit of a section in that community where you could kind of get in under the radar if you had no money, right? Like there's a call it a little bit of affordable housing, maybe is a way to think about it, on the edge of the community. But they had the best school system in the state of Ohio, and that's why my mom put us there. So what ended up happening was we didn't have a lot of money, but I grew up around kids who were going to Europe, on ski trips and living this life. And I'm like, well, that's what I want to be able to do. Like, I want to be able to do those kinds of things with my, like, this is really cool. They get to do all these neat things that I don't get to do. And all of all of the kids that I went to school with, all of their parents were either business owners, entrepreneurs, doctors, or lawyers. I mean, that was basically what the parents did. The interesting thing was, I turned 18 before I graduated from high school. I got my insurance license, started selling insurance, and I started approaching my friends and their parents. So like I said, I started started early, sold insurance through college, was an insurance agent. And so majored in finance. Actually, I ended up getting a triple major in undergrad, not because I wanted to. I took every class I could on investing and finance and a lot of tax classes and things like that. And one day my counselor came to me and they said, "Do you realize you've earned 3 majors? You can graduate." I'm like, "Oh, I had no idea. All right, I'm out of here." Right. So that's kind of how that happened. So to your point, it was just all self-learning the whole time. Really, I just had this insatiable curiosity for money and how things worked, because I wanted to work my way out of it.
I love that. I feel very fortunate in that, I look back at my life and kind of where I've ended up, and there's little to nothing that I would go back and do a mulligan on. I'm quite happy with the way things worked out. One thing that I would go back and tell a younger version of myself, maybe not quite as young as you started, but a younger version of myself, is learn financial literacy. Study this stuff early. Take it seriously, because even at my age, it would have made a massive difference by now, right? When you get started late, there's just a lot of catch up, and a lot of catch up requires a lot of cash, So I've been meaning to talk to my nieces and nephews about this and make sure that they get someone in their ear early to really start taking this stuff seriously.
Yeah. Well, and we could talk later on what I do with my kids if you want to get into that, because it is about instilling it. Because here's the reality of it. And this is for all of us here, right? The schools aren't teaching this. They're not talking about it. And so the only way our kids or grandkids are going to learn this stuff is if we instill it in them. That's where it has to come from. And there's some really great ways to do that. So anyway, that was kind of my drive. And then in terms of the transition into, so when I graduated from college, right, went into the financial world, worked for a couple of Wall Street firms, not in New York, but firms that were based in New York, right, on Wall Street. And at one of the firms, I worked in their private client wealth group. So I worked with some of the wealthiest clients that they had, right, in the entire firm. And because we oversaw such large amounts of money, we were managing and investing a lot of money. A lot of these investment managers would come and meet with us and want to talk about what they're doing and why we should allocate money to what they're doing, right? And it was all about that. So I'll never forget, I was having lunch with a guy one day, and he was showing me what he was doing, and I was looking at his returns, and his returns were pretty phenomenal. And I'm like, explain this to me. And he says, well, what I do what I call distressed debt investing. And I'm like, okay, I've never heard of this before, right? So this is in my mid 20s, mid to 20s. And I said, explain this to me. He says, well, let me tell you about a recent deal I did. He said, there's an airline that filed bankruptcy, right? He says, now when airlines file bankruptcy, sometimes they emerge and a lot of times they don't. So he said, when they filed bankruptcy, right, nobody wants to touch the stock, and the bonds, nobody wants to buy, so they trade for 10 cents on the dollar. He says, and most bonds are backed by the full faith and credit of the company, which there is no faith and credit when you're in bankruptcy, right? And he said, but I did a little research, and it turns out some of the bonds they issued were equipment-backed bonds. So he said, I dug a little further, and it turns out the equipment they're backed by are the airplanes. So he says, I got the tail numbers of the planes that were backing the bonds. And he said, I called a guy, and he says, if I were to fire sale these airplanes, what could I get for them? And it turns out, he says, I could get 70 cents on the dollar for what I'm paying for the bonds, but the bonds are trading at 10 cents. So he said, worst case scenario is, he says, I buy these bonds. So he says, I bought the bond portfolio because nobody wanted it. So he says, I bought the bonds, He says, worst case scenario is if they don't emerge from bankruptcy, I can get 70 cents, right, on the dollar for the bonds. If they come out of bankruptcy, he said, I can get closer to 100 cents on the dollar, right, par value. And I said, this is brilliant. Like, this is one of the best things I've ever heard. I said, I need to tell my mom and all my friends about this. Everybody needs to invest in this. And he says, they can't. And I'm like, why not? He says, well, they have to be accredited. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Well, and so here's what I tell people. If you don't know what that term means, you're not. Okay, you're not accredited, which means you don't do this stuff. And so I said, but this is the kind of stuff that really works, is less risky, and is proven over a period of time to work. But you're telling me that because of the investment structure, people can't get into it. So that was really what started my drive, because my whole purpose was I wanted to help regular everyday people like myself and my mom and people that I knew. But so many of the things that I saw in that world, you had to be accredited, so you don't even know they exist, right? And so that's where I started looking, and that's where I came across real estate, right? Because one of the basic premises of the way our country was organized was that land ownership and home ownership is a basic tenet to what the founding fathers felt were important to have a thriving, successful nation. People had to own a piece of the dream, so to speak. And so the rules allowed anyone virtually, right, to buy real estate. I mean, virtually anybody can buy real estate, and you can buy it for any purpose, and you don't need licenses, and you don't need to hit certain numbers, right? There's so many ways to do it. And so when I started studying real estate, I started finding all these creative people that are basically doing what the guy was doing, but they're not doing it with airplanes, right? Commercial aircraft. They're doing it with houses, or they're doing it with apartment buildings, or right, and all these kinds of things. And I said, this seems to be the answer. The other side of that, though, is that for most people, and we can get into this too, but for most people, their largest investable asset. So the problem when people report out net worth numbers is that a significant portion of their net worth is usually their home, which, in my opinion, it's not an investment. It's right. We all need a home, but you can't go invest your home, right? So I kind of take that out of it. What is where's the money that people can use to build wealth? For most Americans, it's in their retirement account. And so that's where I started saying, okay, how do I put this together, right? And then that was kind of my foray. So it was kind of a combination of, yes, real estate, but also my knowledge and experience in the financial world as well that kind of came into play here.
So I want to bridge into like kind of the nitty gritty of how to both, protect and grow your money as a real estate investor. But I do want to go back really quickly to the accredited investor definition, because everything you just talked about, like what the research that guy did to find those distressed bonds in aerospace industry or airline manufacturing industry or whatever it was, like that takes a lot of smarts, and it's just a very, very clever kind of business discovery. Right. But my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, of being an accredited investor is it's really more of a financial metric than a experience or smarts kind of metric. Can you kind of go over the qualifications a little bit of what it means to be accredited?
So accredited is a financial metric. Now, let me explain the concept behind this, and I'll give you my personal opinion on this. So the concept behind it is that there's certain investments that are riskier and require a higher level of sophistication, I believe is the exact word they use in the regs, sophisticated investor, to make certain types of investments. And therefore, they set requirements. The requirements to determine that you're sophisticated enough is basically your net worth or your income. Now those numbers can change from year to year a little bit, but you have to have a certain level of income or a certain net worth, and then you fall into that category. And if you don't fall into that category, then you're not allowed to see any of these investments. So who falls into that category? Effectively, the top 1% of the wealthiest people in the country. And that's why I say if people aren't familiar with the term, then you're not one probably, right? In most cases, that's true. Now, that's a really nice thought, right? Because it sounds like that's set up to protect people from making poor choices. However, having been on both sides of this world, my opinion is it's a way of limiting some of the really good things to a certain segment of people, right? That's my opinion on it. Because so many of the investments that I saw, yes, there are some very sophisticated things out there. I'm not trying to negate that. But there were some things out there that, in my opinion, the risk was less, the returns were more, and the fundamentals that underlined it were way easier to understand. But again, you can't even read about it if you're not accredited. I mean, you have to certify that you're accredited, or the investment sponsor has to certify it in some way, and you have to verify this stuff. So anyway, it's just a wall that goes up that prevents most people from seeing certain things. And so one of the ways around that and to resolve that is to be able to do the same types of strategies with different types of assets or structures. Put it simply.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, like, I agree with you. It seems to me it should be more of a financial literacy test than anything else, right? Because we're talking about buying bonds at 10 cents on the dollar. Like, you don't need $500,000 to do that, right? It's more of like recognizing the opportunity. Whereas on the flip side, an idiot with $1 million that puts $500,000 into Apple goes up X percentage. They've got the financial metrics needed to apply and get accreditation. But like, what literacy have they actually shown? Like that. It seems like a bit of a gap that it could or maybe should be filled.
Well, on that point, so given my role, right, and what I do, and the fact that we have a pretty large financial institution and whatnot, I go to DC every year, and I meet with various three-letter agencies and regulators and various members of Congress and people who are on certain committees and that kind of thing to lobby on behalf of our company and our industry and our clients. And so when I was there this past April, one of the discussions that came up from some of the folks in DC, the people who are writing the rules, right, and amend rules and all those types of things, is that they're actually talking about, it's funny you mentioned that, maybe we should allow more people to be accredited if they can pass a test, right? So in other words, let's base it on knowledge so that they can have access to more things. It's interesting that there's at least a discussion around it. I don't know what will happen with that, but there's actually a discussion in DC right now about that very topic.
Interesting. I'd love to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of work, I know that you work with a whole range of real estate investors, people that are doing wholesaling, people that are doing wholesaling plus very diversified portfolios, land investors. So you've really seen it from all different, again, some of like the more niche distressed investments, like in investing in notes and things like that. So you've really kind of seen it from all angles. So let's kind of get into like maybe a foundation, and then we can get into some more specifics. But the foundation of, again, how you help investors both protect and grow their growing assets.
Yeah. So what Specialized is, and what Specialized does, is we're a self-directed IRA custodian, right? And we have other accounts, right, that other than IRAs, but most people know the term IRAs. And in general, I'm going to use that term, I'll use the terms interchangeably. But retirement accounts, and specifically self-directed retirement accounts, can help real estate investors in two ways. One side of the coin, because it's a double-sided coin, right? And this is a gold coin, by the way. So one side of the coin is that you can build and accelerate and scale your own personal wealth by growing your own accounts. The other side of that coin is that you can scale and build and grow your business by using other people's accounts as the funding mechanism or the bank for your real estate investments. So there's two ways that this shows up and can impact somebody based on what they're doing and what their focus is.
Okay, so I get the one side of the coin, right? Like, and I think most people do. Like, you have even if it's just a basic Roth IRA account, and you've got some S&P 500, and you've got some dividend stuff, and like it's basic, right? Like, I think people understand how that can grow wealth in a tax sheltered kind of way. The other side of the coin, though, specific to business and how it can generate funding, that sounds like a mind blower. So can you kind of get into that a little bit, and in terms of how investors might be able to fund and grow their businesses through this route?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a quick step back because I know you mentioned that we have some people who are new to the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So what is a self-directed IRA? I don't want to just assume that people, they might have heard that term. So what is a self-directed IRA? So I put IRAs or retirement
Thanks
accounts.
for doing my job. I should have asked that question.
That's all right. So I put accounts into two categories: plain vanilla and truly self-directed. Okay, so what's a plain vanilla IRA? A plain vanilla IRA or retirement account is one that most people in this country have right now. It sits at a bank or a brokerage house, and they invest in things like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And it's usually mutual funds, but it can be stocks and bonds too, or what we call marketable securities. That's the category. A truly self-directed IRA, by contrast, is one that allows you and I to invest in anything allowed by the government. So when the government wrote the rule book, they said, look, we're going to allow you to do all these things, but a for-profit business who offers retirement account services doesn't have to let you do everything we allow you to do. They're allowed to restrict investments. So as an example, take a brand new investor who says, hey, look, I've gotten some education and training under my belt. I found a property I'd like to invest in, but I don't have the money, right? Well, if they had a retirement account with money in it, they could use that retirement account to actually buy that property. They could buy it, fix it, and sell it. They could buy it, fix it, and hold it and rent it out and create an income stream. They can do all that in a retirement account, but you need a self-directed account to do that. And so what happens is, where there's a lot of misinformation out there on this topic, is if somebody goes and, like, they listen to this podcast example, and let's say their IRA is at Fidelity or Chase or pick any big firm, and they say, hey, I want to buy real estate, a piece of real estate in my retirement account. They're going to say you can't do that, and what they really mean is you can't do that here, right? That's what I mean by plain vanilla. They restrict you to commissionable, fee-based securities that they make money on. A truly self-directed IRA takes off those handcuffs and allows you to do anything with your money so long as the government allows it. And that's why Specialized exists, because the big financial firms won't hold these types of assets. So you need somebody who will hold the assets so you get all the benefits of the retirement account and keep it compliant, right, with IRS statutes and those types of things, and all the administration that goes along with it. And so that's what a self-directed IRA is. So, just as an example, like I said, somebody, if you have a retirement account and you got money in that retirement account, you can transfer that into a self-directed retirement account. Now you can use that money to invest in real estate, right? Now that's the first step to understanding the second. But go ahead. You're gonna.
Well, my question is, because as an account holder, self-directed or plain vanilla, as you said, let's stick with self-directed. I'm unless I'm misunderstanding, I'm thinking of that as this is my personal account, as in like attached to me as an individual taxpayer, right? Whereas if I buy a property and it's not going to be a home that I'm going to live in, but it's actually going to be an investment vehicle, I'm going to own that under an LLC to protect that asset. So what is the connection between your personal investment account owning an asset that's held under an LLC? Is that an easy bridge to make?
It's very easy. So let me explain it this way. There's 3 places we can potentially invest in real estate or purchase a piece of real estate. So the first place is in our own personal name, right? As an individual, right? You and I, we've probably done that in the past. We can buy real estate in our own personal name. The second place you can buy it, if you have one, is an LLC or any kind of legal entity, depending upon what you prefer, You can set up a legal entity, and that legal entity can take title to that real estate. Now, your LLC is a completely separate legal entity from you, and we know that because you have a social security number. Your LLC has a EIN, right? So the government clearly designates those two things separately, two completely different legal entities. There's a third place that you can also acquire real estate, and that is with a retirement account or an IRA as an example. Now, that IRA is a completely separate legal entity from you and your LLC because it has a separate EIN, right? And so the way that I tell people to think about this, to not make it over confusing, because a lot of people say, well, I've heard it's confusing. Well, it is if you don't understand the fundamentals. One way to think about this is that if you want to own a piece of real estate and get all the benefits, you buy it in your personal name. If you want your LLC to get the benefits, you buy it in the LLC name. If you want your IRA to get the benefits and use that money to buy it, you do it in your IRA. It's just another place that you can acquire assets. That's really what it is. But it comes with a whole slew of advantages that we don't get from LLCs and we don't get from buying it in our personal name, right? And so that's the reason to think about doing some transactions there.
Well, the sort of genesis of my question, though, was legal protections, right? Like if you're going to have tenants in toilets, you want legal protections that you would get under that EIN, LLC, kind of corporate veil protected structure. So do you still, if you buy an asset through a self-directed IRA, do you still have legal protections?
Okay, so yeah, I'll give you a couple. I'll mention a few things about this. Okay, since we're focusing on we're talking about asset protection angle. So one of the advantages to retirement accounts, and I'm going to make a general statement because it does depend on the account you have and it depends on the state you're in. So I'm going to make a general statement.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, your retirement accounts are judgment proof in all 50 states. So what does that mean? Let's say you personally had to file bankruptcy. The court cannot attach a judgment to any asset or income stream that's owned by your retirement account. If you had a business that you had to file bankruptcy on, the court cannot attach a judgment to any asset or income stream owned inside your retirement account. If you were tried and convicted of a criminal offense, the court could take your life, but they can't take your retirement account. Now, that doesn't seem right, but that's how it works, right? And so literally, I've had people who buy rental portfolios, bringing up the rental properties, so I'll stick with your example, properties, rent them out inside their retirement account. Things can go sideways outside the retirement account. They still have those assets. They still have that income coming in. That can't be taken, okay? Now, that's outside looking in. Your question is really more about inside looking out, right? So,
right.
One way to buy real estate with a self-directed IRA is that you could set up an LLC. So the IRA owns the LLC owns the property. Now you're basically accomplishing exactly what you said, right? So you can take direct title to real estate in your retirement account, or the retirement account can own an entity in between the account and the asset or the investment you're buying. That's another way to do it. Here, I'll give you one more just as a bonus. You could purchase one piece of real estate, and instead of thinking about multiple LLCs, you can think about it multiple retirement accounts. There's no rule that says you can only have one retirement account. So literally, if you had 5 properties, you could set up 5 different accounts, right? Split the money, 5 different accounts. Each property is owned by its own separate account. Each account has its own separate account number, right? And by the way, because this is a retirement account and it's administered by a licensed financial institution, we're bound by privacy laws. So let's say you had a property and you had a slip and fall, and they go and talk to an attorney, and the attorney says, well, what's the first thing you're going to do? What assets does this person have? So they go out and they do a search, and the owner on record is account number 123, Specialized Trust Company, account number 12345. So they say, well, what the heck is this? So they call Specialized, and they say, who owns this property? And our answer is, we can't tell you that. You need a subpoena and a court order to come for us to release any information. And if you subpoena us, then we have to give it over to our law firm. They have to review it, make sure we're not violating any of our privacy rules or regulations that we're accountable to.
Mm-hmm.
So now what happens? The attorney oftentimes will call back the person and say, hey, yeah, I can take your case. I need a $5,000 retainer. And if they say that, it's done. It's over, right? People don't pay attorneys. People think they're, you know, they you know how they do it. They take a percentage of the settlement. If they can't get a quick, easy settlement, oftentimes they go away. So it's not asset protection in the sense it's bulletproof, but it's a big deterrent. So that's just another way of doing it. So yes, you can use the LLC still. You can use an LLC. You can use the IRA directly. Lots of different ways to do it.
You know, I think it's smart. It's very smart, and obviously, like being able to split things up into different accounts is, I think, something that most people probably wouldn't think of. It's one of those kind of, you know, duh, once somebody tells you kind of things, but like you don't always think of it off the top of your head. But it's, you know, you can only follow the money so far in that case, right? You're tracking it, you're following the footprints, you hit a dead end, the footprints disappear, there's nowhere to go, right? So well, you lose the trail.
And your name's not on anything. Because here's the thing to keep in mind. When you buy a piece of real estate in your retirement account, you're not a corporate signer for Specialized Trust Company, right?
Yeah.
You're the beneficial owner, right, of the beneficiary, the beneficial owner of the account, but you're not authorized to sign on the company's behalf, right? So unless you want it to, for some reason, your name never appears on anything. It's our name. We're the ones who sign the docs. You don't sign the docs, right? We sign the docs. Yeah. So so for people who are concerned about anonymity, it is a way that you don't have to put your name on it. Is what I'm saying, right? So there is a way to create anonymity around it. There are some asset protection benefits. So when people talk about IRAs, they oftentimes think of the tax benefits that come with retirement accounts, and there's a ton of those, obviously. But there's so many other benefits that people don't realize. Anonymity being one, asset protection being another, right? These things we're just listing off right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I want to, you know, a lot of what we're talking about is kind of the end result of what you want to get to. But I want to kind of go back to the building blocks. You know, you and I talked a little bit pre-show. You know, Deal Nation is this way, powered by Launch Control, SMS engagement platform. And Launch Control's user base really mirrors the entrepreneur story within real estate investment. The people that are on our light subscription tend to be early stage entrepreneurs who are just learning how to really build up their business. They're trying to create cash flow, and they have a vision of where they want to go as real estate investors. But they are kind of in that wear all the hats, build up the machinery stage of things. When they get to our core level subscription, they're usually running a small team, and they're looking to kind of exit out of some of the simpler tasks. But they've also now probably got some cash that they're sitting on, right? They're not funneling everything back into the business. They've now got some cash where they need to make some decisions on what to do with that. And then when you get all the way up to the pro and enterprise level, they're typically running, if not at a 7-figure business, they're pretty close, and some are into 7 and even 8 figures with their business. So they're obviously and diversified real estate approaches. So they're obviously going to need a high level of asset growth initiatives and protection. So I'd love to kind of take it one by one, if you don't mind, and talk about kind of some advice that you would give people at each stage of entrepreneurship to kind of end up at the place that would be an idealized sort of spot for a real estate investor to get to.
Yeah, so I'll say that there's, and I'll go back to the double-sided coin for this. So if you take somebody who's just starting out, one of the challenges they have starting is they say, well, I need money for my first investment, right, or my first deal. They aren't thinking about the fact that they have a retirement account because a lot of people, right, the way they start the retirement account is that they get it like just like I did, right? Start working for a company, you fill out the form, money gets taken out of your paycheck, it adds up over time, you leave the company, you're probably not thinking much about it. So you leave it there, or maybe you roll it over someplace and then it's just sitting there, you're not thinking about it. You can actually use that money to invest in real estate, right? So that's number one, is that what I tell new investors is when they're thinking about, okay, where am I going to source the capital from to do some of these early transactions? One of my responses is you may already have the money and not even realize it. So the first thing to do is pay attention to what you already have. Do you have a retirement account? Okay. Now, what I will say has been my experience in real estate investing is that the biggest challenge when somebody's getting started is finding that first deal, finding that first transaction. Once they do that a few times, it's like, okay, now I've got this dialed in, right? I know I can find deals because I've proven it to myself. But now what's the next wall they hit? It's funding. It's the financing of the deals. It's like, okay, now I'm coming across deals, but if I can't finance them, it's all for naught. That's the other side of the coin. So one of the holy grails of real estate investing is private money. The biggest challenge with private money is finding it. Why? Because 1% of people in this country are considered wealthy, meaning they have discretionary income and money in the bank that they could invest. So the challenge is that people are looking for that 1 in 100 person. They're trying to build a relationship with that person, figure out who they are to fund some of this stuff, right? Or they're piecing together credit cards or whatever they're doing, right? In that phase where they're trying to make that next transition. But here's the interesting thing about it. What I tell people is this, is that when you understand that you can use a retirement account to fund a real estate investment. So in other words, what we've talked about up to this point is your IRA could buy a piece of property. But guess what? Your IRA or your retirement account could also own a note or a mortgage, meaning I can lend my IRA money to you. You can buy the property. You give me a note. So you borrow my money and now I'm part of your private bank, right? So to give you a perspective on that and the opportunity there that people miss is that right now, as of this year, right, 2025, there's over $44 trillion. That I did not misspeak. That's trillion with a T dollars in retirement accounts right now today. That number grows year after year because one of the things that drives that number is the fact that every 2 weeks, right, every month, money's being pulled out of somebody's paycheck and put into a retirement account. It happens automatically every week, every month, every year. So that number just grows and grows and grows. Now, here's the interesting thing. How many people in this country have a retirement account? Well, I'm 50 years old, right? And if you look at people over 50, 8 out of 10 Americans have a retirement account. People 50 and older, 8 out of 10. If you drop down to age 40, 7 out of 10 people have a retirement account. 7 out of 10. So you go from 1 in 100 people to 7 out of 10 people that you're connected to on Facebook, Instagram, where, Starbucks, wherever you go. What I tell people is you are surrounded by private investors and private money. You just aren't seeing it because you don't know where to look yet. And so, yeah. So when you run into that problem where you're like, okay, I'm hitting a wall because now my limitation is the access of the money that I have access to. Retirement accounts will solve that for you, right? There's more money out there than most people could ever invest. And so one of the things that I would suggest to folks who are building and growing their business and transitioning is focus on private money, have a plan for private money and build the IRAs into it because that's where the money is, right? There's so much money there.
Maybe this is a stupid question, but I'm curious. In the beginning of our conversation, we kind of talked about your primary home as not being an asset. Robert Kiyosaki talks about that in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that every real estate investor has read. And can you or should you own your primary residency through a retirement account? Because I know that a lot of people would like refinance their homes, do a cash out refinance, use the cash out refinance to then fund real estate projects. Like, is that something that people can or should do?
Well, you can't do it.
Okay.
So that's the short answer. Yeah. So when it comes to retirement account investing, there's certain rules in place. They call them prohibited transactions. We won't go into all of that now. But one of the things that you cannot do is use any asset personally or by your personal resident with your retirement account money inside your retirement account. Let me be specific. Okay. I'll give you a little bit of an exception to the rule, and this is also a way to help entrepreneurs and business owners right now in real estate as well. So one of the things one of the rules is you can't derive any personal benefit from an investment owned inside your retirement account. You're supposed to just grow. It's supposed to, right? Because remember, it's a separate legal entity. So the growth and appreciation of the retirement account itself is the end game for anything you do with your retirement account money in your retirement account. However, let's go back to that beginning investor who says, well, I have money in my retirement account, but it's in my retirement account, right? I need money right now. I'm doing deals in my own personal name because I'm trying to, right, build a business and build an income stream. Okay, so one of the accounts that's widely popular with our clients, it's one of our most popular accounts, is what we call the individual 401k, or it's also called a solo 401k, or some people call it a Roth 401k. But we can roll money from an IRA, transfer it into a self-directed 401k, and now that 401k allows you legally to borrow from it. So if you want access to your money right now in your business, and you have money in an IRA someplace, perhaps a better fit is a 401k, because you can have money in the account to invest and grow it for future wealth and take advantage of all the tax benefits you get. At the same time, you can borrow from the account and use that money in your own personal business any way you see fit. Think of it like a personal line of credit, commercial line of credit, however you want to see it. Could you take money out and borrow it that way and use that to buy part of your personal residence? You could, right? So in that scenario, it would work.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this really comes down to is, we started off our conversation talking about financial literacy and you really getting started on that, chasing your own curiosity, and at a very young age, kind of getting educated about this. And I think that for real estate entrepreneurs, the advice would be to start as early as possible, right? To gain that financial literacy as an entrepreneur, and all the things that you can do to both safeguard and grow your business as quickly as possible. But it is a tailored discussion, right? Like you and we could talk for the next 4 hours about possibilities, but really that light subscriber on the launch control, from the launch control community, really needs to talk to you and your team and come up with a plan, or at least gain some insights about what they should be doing as an early stage entrepreneur. Anybody that's on our core subscription that is starting to scale up their business really should have a one-on-one conversation with you and your team to see, what they need to do now and what they need to plan for to scale the way that they want to scale. And anybody that's in a 7-figure business that is feeling disorganized or unprotected, again, they need to talk to, somebody like you and your team that can give them that necessary financial literacy to make really informed decisions for the business.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll mention for the 7-figure, right, the more advanced folks that you mentioned, is that one of the things that, because we have a lot of clients from the mastermind, right, that work with us, and one of their key concerns is, how do I lower my tax bill every year, right? So one of the things that we also do particularly for higher net worth clients who are focused on lowering their taxes, is we do a custom plan design. So we look at the person as an individual, at their family and their business situation. We can map out like multiple plans. So we have clients who will shelter six figures, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in these accounts to reduce their tax bill now or reduce it or eliminate it in the future by investing in the same things that they're doing already. So there's a way to position this to where, that's one of the things I love about it. Whether you're a beginner or you're very advanced, there's ways to benefit from incorporating it into what you're doing. And to your point, yeah, it really begins with kind of understanding your situation and having that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really fascinating topic, and I absolutely implore everyone to follow up and get educated in this, because it can make you a lot of money, it can save you a lot of money. It's a very worthwhile conversation. So with that in mind, what's the best way to get in touch with you and your team? We're going to put everything in the show notes below for everyone listening, wherever you're listening, so you can click on those links down there. But yeah, Edwin, what's the best way to reach out and carry on the conversation?
Yeah, so the best way to if this is something that you think appeals to you, and I would say one of the things that we're offering right now as a company is if you go to the website, www.specializedtrustcompany.com, specializedtrustcompany.com. On the front of the website, we're giving away my free book, and you can get a free strategy call with one of our self-directed specialists. And the purpose of that call is to be able to say, hey, you know, I heard Edwin on the podcast, and I have some questions about my situation or how this might benefit me, or some ways that I can incorporate this, or I'm interested in private money, or whatever it is. And we'll have we have professionals who will spend the time just helping you understand it and how it might fit into what you're doing. And so the website has that free offer. It's got our 800 number on there. You can reach out, and we'll be happy to answer all of your questions and see how this might fit you or your business.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And yeah, let's keep in touch through the mastermind and keep discussing this.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you so much, man.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Evan. Bye.